I want to say thank you to Deborah and Sharon, Annika Kruger, for inviting me to grace this evening. I'm always very humbled by having to talk about this experience, really because I feel like I got caught up as a passenger in this journey, in this journey that miracle over there took us through. Puppy Kruger was a defining moment in the team that I work with's existence. It changed many things. The experience of treating her changed the way we look at all our patients. It enabled me to look at medicine differently, the practice of surgery, and the way we approach people. Relatives, people who wanted to kill me. Annika Kruger sitting over there thinking about the day she was expecting a young European female because she heard Dr. Mia was coming, only to find, in her own words, this Taliban doctor that turned up to treat her little one, who was so badly and so devastatingly injured at the time. And I must say we've all come such a long way. It was really a big journey for all of us. Sharon approached me and said, I think you've done something so selfless. And I had to break, this idea that she had. I had to shatter the idea that she had in her mind that we were these group of selfless healers that were out there as angels of hope, and that we did some sort of great miracle. The only miracle about the entire story, this entire event that had happened, and the entire book Annika's put so nicely into words, is sitting over there in the stroller. There was no other miracle that had happened. We, as a team of surgeons, nurses, anesthetists, physicians, pediatricians, neurologists, even porters and cleaners and everyone that looked after Puppy in the time she was in hospital and after, the therapists, occupational therapists and physios and so on. We all just followed her lead. She guided us throughout this experience. And I said to Sharon, there was nothing selfless about it. It's actually rather selfish because we all driven by a certain passion, a certain sense of satisfaction. And ultimately, we all just wanted to see this little one where she is today and where she's going to be in years to come. It was our passion to do the very best we could with the work we did. And, it was each day of bringing her through another day, of struggling with each day we thought she wouldn't make it to the next day. When her kidneys failed, when she developed another pneumonia, when her heart had stopped on 5 different occasions, when we had to be told, when I had senior colleagues come to me and say, you want to put skin on a dead patient. Today I point them, those same gray-haired doubters, and I say to them, is that a dead child that you see there? When you criticized us, when you ran to the media and told them these young mavericks trying their luck, cloning skin, what do they think? And, the sad thing is those very same individuals today try and, steal the limelight of really what should be their patients. It was a very humbling experience for people like us. We had a patient that we didn't know would survive the next 12 hours, the next day. There were days when we would all sit up until really late talking to Annika Kruger about the people who worked on her farm and the people from Alice Ras, Lepalale, and trying to wait to see if Puppy Kruger's heart would beat like it beat before it stopped that day. And we said to those guys, if you had been here night after night, if you had been here on these weekends, if you had struggled with the anxiety that we had, you would have thought very differently before you passed comments like those of the dead patient. And in the end, we had to come together as a team. And one of our nurses really guided us through this, where he said, he's an intensive care nurse, and I think Puppy's favorite nurse at the time. And he said, he used to come in on his weekends, on his free weekends, just to see how she was doing, even though he really lived very far away from the hospital. And he said to us, whatever happens, you have to try your best. And don't listen to the doubters, don't listen to the criticism, just keep going. And that's what kept all of us going. I think we all had a sense of academic achievement, medical achievement. We wanted to see her do well because within each of us, we wanted to see our work actually amount to something. So I think in the end, we were a lot more selfish than than it seemed. And there was a lot of media hype about things. And I have to qualify that when the hospital manager came to us on the eve of Puppy's skin graft, she popped her head into theater at about 6 o'clock in the evening and said, there's some journalists who want to cover the story, would you mind? And I thought there'd be someone from the local paper sitting in the corner with a little notepad. And she said, can you sign to say that as a team, as medical experts, you're okay with journalists coming into the theater and observing her? And I said, as long as Mr. and Mrs. Kruger are happy with it, we're okay with it, as long as they don't get in our way. And we thought, at best there'd be a little article on page 6 of the Star newspaper or something like that. It was only on the day of the actual procedure when we saw these huge satellite dishes outside the hospital. And, guys I used to watch on Aaron Barnett from CNN and the likes of him walking around the hospital. And we had to ask what was going on. And then they said, no, they're here for your procedure. I said, well, it's not my procedure, firstly, but I really didn't think it was going to be such a media storm. And, that was something that made us all shrink into our shells a little bit, but very daunting and added to the stress levels quite significantly. And we, none of us had been trained on how to talk to media and how to talk to people. So the manager kind of carried the can for all of us in that way. And I must say, in the end, there was so much attention on everyone else, and then on Puppy. And on the day that Puppy left the hospital, I went to say goodbye, and we said to the media, "This is all about the family. It's all about Puppy. Try and avoid sort of us as a team, because we, none of us doctors are really, going to be involved today." And for me, that was actually a very important day, because to see her leave the hospital and get out of there, it was a day when we thought would never happen. We never thought we'd see this child smiling at us, leaving. Cornel Duplessis was a photographer for the Beeld newspaper at the time. He took a picture of Puppy grabbing onto my hand on my finger rather, as I was about to leave. And I said to him, didn't I ask you not to take pictures of me today? It was really just a picture of her hand with mine. And that picture subsequently went viral on social media. Something I only found out later, and he actually gave me a frame with that picture on, which I have in my rooms to this day. And most people who come to the rooms don't really know anything about that. It looks like a child and an adult's hands together. But it speaks volumes for me. And everyone thinks, well, it's a child holding on to a kid's hand. But I have to say, it's a child. I mean, it's not an adult holding a child's hand. It's a child leading me more than anything else. Because I was leaving her bedside, and she grabbed onto my finger and wouldn't allow me to leave. And that's when he took that picture. And for me, that's something that will always carry me, because really, this child led me to think about my practice differently. To lose my academic sense of the work I did, and to gain more of a sense of humanity, which I think all surgeons need to be reminded of from time to time. And the irony of it is that as surgeons, we're only reminded that we can't play God when we lose our patients. Something every surgeon hopes not to ever see is a patient that leaves us. So, I have to say again, really it wasn't a selfless act. We were all motivated, and I was very much motivated by a sense of wanting to see this work. If you read the book, you will know the story of how Pippi was burnt and how badly she was burnt. And you'll read about how the skin was cloned. We went to visit the lab in Boston to see how it was, the exact process, how difficult it is actually to clone someone's skin. Whether you confuse human skin with fungal elements, whether you could potentially get a fly's DNA caught into that skin as it replicated, because a fly flying over, dropping a leg or a wing or something into the mix, that actually can happen, where those cells would get multiplied into her cells. It's a very specialized lab. You had to wear a spacesuit to walk into there. If you touched the wall, you had to change your gloves. If you breathed over the agar that they grew the skin on, you had to discard that batch, and it would consistently be checked to match, to see that the DNA matched. And that was something that was so huge. And I only visited the lab after the skin was cloned to really get an idea of how it was actually done technically and scientifically, to see if we could maybe do the same here at a fraction of the cost, to be able to offer it to more of our patients. I mean, imagine in the future, you would have a small burn on your hand. You would pop over to your GP and he would take a little sample of your skin, send it off to the lab, and 2 weeks later, you would return and he would put a patch of skin onto you without having to take a skin graft or harvest, as we call it, from the rest of your body. And, that for me was very overwhelming. It was a big challenge for us. It was something we chased. Then to see her survive, I can't actually believe that she's got hair growing on her head. Entire head was burnt so badly, and some of you have seen in the pictures of her. Pippi had, her skin was so badly burnt, it looked like thick leather at the time, and we had to remove it because it was so badly burnt. I'm consistently overwhelmed to see how she grows and how she's developing. And often we lose patients, we lose adult patients who've been burnt less than she's been burnt. They succumb to all kinds of infections. And she did this amazing job. I mean, if any of you look into her eyes, she's got these burning, deep eyes that just stared at us through those bandages that said, I'm going to come through this. And I think that really that's what kept all of us going. That miracle is really just over there. I can't reiterate more to say that, we really didn't do anything selfless. It was all motivated by us wanting to see her succeed. We have I'm part of a school incentive program where we incentivize matriculants to do well. Because one thing we all do at the end of the year when we see the matric results is we become very good armchair critics, and we all know, to the best of our abilities, we all know what it is that has led to the poor, dismal matric results in this country. And we all, whether it be the Minister of Education or whether it be teachers, whether it be the learners themselves, the school system, the buildings, all of this, do we know really? And, we thought maybe we should have something to incentivize these learners, because we have drug dealers to contend with. We have no books to fight against. We have kids with backgrounds where they have to go home and educate their parents. Kids with no parents, with older siblings who are telling them there's some good in going to school, but maybe it's better if you make some money along the way, or maybe if you try and cheat your way through it, it'll be better. So we thought, well, we'll try and incentivize these learners to do better. And, the motivation that I got for that was to say, well, this was a situation where we were so complacent and we were so lost. We didn't really know, we didn't have a template to follow. A lot of the kids that we see in schools don't have templates to follow, not in this country anyway. Annika Kruger has been a big inspiration for us. She said, someone who never gave up. And when the odds were properly stacked against her, she had scientific evidence that was looking her in the face and saying, your child won't survive, and if she does, she's not really going to amount to much. and you're going to have a sick child on your hands for years to come, so sorry for you. She decided she's not taking no for an answer. That's the motivation that we carry through into this school project of ours. And we say to the kids that, whether you like it or not, whether the odds are stacked against you, we're going to pull you through this, and we're going to reward you when you do well. We've managed to get kids over the last 5 years through school in very, very poor schools where they, have to stand outside in the rain, in the hot sun, and you name it, in the morning assemblies, and get told how to carry on through the day. Often look at this story, and look at where they are, and you think that it's all a South African story at the end of the day. And if we apply the logic from one completely unrelated field to this one, or to any other field, we'll find success, we'll find optimism, we'll find reason that we're all part of one family at the end of the day. The Krugers never saw themselves leaving rural, very white South Africa, coming to the Garden City Hospital in Brixton in Johannesburg, where they had colored people, Indian people, black people, all kinds of South Africans coming together for the same cause to get this child through it. Annika Kruger saw a different world. Erwin Kruger saw a different world. They learned to be strong South Africans. They learned to go back to Lepalali and say, in South Africa, we're all one people. Yeah, we speak different languages, we look different, we have Taliban doctors, we have racists among us, we have angels among us, but we all at the end of the day need to make it work. That South African story is something that I think will be told many times over and over again. There was one evening when we were having a chat in the ICU, in those critical days when we were waiting for the skin to be grown, when a domestic worker from Fordsburg walked into the ICU, and somehow she walked her way in non-visiting hours. Somehow the door opened and she walked in, and she put her hand into her chest, into her bra, and pulled out a 20 Rand note. She said, the nurse over there says you're the doctor that's looking after that girl. And I said, how do you know this girl? She said the kids at her school had a fundraiser of sorts. They heard about it, and I must admit, at the time, I didn't realize that so many people out there had actually found out about this little girl. And schools were having cake sales, and people were raising money for this little burnt girl, and there were little pin tags going around with Pippi's face on them saying, Save Pippi. Congrats to Annika Kruger and them for getting everyone involved at that stage. She said, this is my 20 Rand I want to donate to this child because I heard you doing such a good job. And I almost broke down into tears when she said that. And I said, but do you know this child? She said, no. The kids I work for told me about it. And the kids I look after, they told me about it. And I just thought, she spoke in broken Zulu, and she tried, this was her contribution. And it was only then that we realized that the reach, the humanity that went out there, this is what brought us all together as South Africans, as human beings. So, really there was so much emotion in that I thought, we've come such a long way from, where we were. And these kind of things is what the future of this country will be made up of. It's a very nice saying that I love of Eleanor Roosevelt that says the future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams. And I really like that saying because I think it applies in my field particularly well, because as doctors we become very complacent. I worked at the Chris Hani Baragwanath for many years, and a lot of my practice was shaped there. And I must say it was a very good technical learning experience. It was a very good skills enhancing experience. But those years also made me very complacent. I became like a lot of the doctors I know, my seniors, my teachers, we're all very skeptical. Our knee-jerk reaction is to be a bit negative when we're faced with a challenge. We all have this idea in our mind that when we're finished telling our patients' relatives about how ill they are or how severe the accident they'd been through was, and we're going to finish resuscitating them, and we're going to do this scan, and we're going to do this operation, and we're going to try our best to get them to survive, for them to turn around and look at us and say, so can we go now? You know, and then you realize that no matter, we had this idea that, you know, we were conquering the earth in this little hospital, not realizing that what was happening outside in Soweto was really gruesome, to the point that they had something more compelling. There was a bigger reason for them to leave the hospital. And it took us a long time to understand that. We're skeptical about it. What's the use of explaining to them, because they're just going to run off anyway. But what are they going to? They're going to a sick child. They're going to a locked house with a baby alone on its own. They're going to electrical appliances that may burn the house down if they don't get there on time. They're going to a place where they're worried that their very neighbor may rob them if they don't get back to it on time. And that, you know, they want to make sure there's a home for their relative to get to by the time they're finished. And I say, this story, you know, it brought everything home for us. We have senior colleagues who were working with us. You know, a very well-respected pediatrician in this city, Dr. Miles Bartlett, taught me so much throughout this experience. He brought Pippi through some of the worst ordeals that she'd been through. When it was time to dialyze her kidneys, he was standing there doing it for her. When it was time to treat the worst pneumonias that she'd, you know, gathered because she was lying on her back without being able to move, that all those bugs just sat there and infected her lungs so badly. He pulled her through with antibiotics some of us had never even heard about. And he just stood there with his cigarette in his hand saying, don't worry, we'll get her there. And took another puff and walked along. But really a humbling experience for surgeons. We really do think we're superior to other doctors, I have to confess. And this was a very humbling experience because we had to learn to put our egos aside. Everyone knows the joke about difference between God and surgeons. You know, God doesn't think he's a surgeon. And that was something that really, you know, I was grateful to somebody like Miles to say, well, you know what, let me teach you a thing or two, my boy. And I work a lot with him since then. Had to learn that my discipline is just a little part of the treatment that every patient needs. And I consult him for many other problems as well, many other patients as well. And we work together and he teaches me so much. And, you know, this really was something that I think will never come together for many of our colleagues. And, you know, we'll take our time and we'll learn a lot from it. But really, I would say to you, read this book about Pippi, but bear in mind that there's a million stories behind the story that Annika couldn't tell you. And maybe take some time to chat to her while she's here. Because, you know, I think this mother's desperation, where she wouldn't take no for an answer. And really, we gave her all the alternatives along the way. One day, one of the more professorial types had walked into the ICU and advised her that morphine and making her child comfortable and saying a prayer and letting go and saying goodbye to her was really the answer to things, and not to listen to these mavericks who thought they could pull her through it. And she said, thank you very much. And she came back to us and said, please don't listen to anybody else and just do whatever I tell you to do. And she just refused to take no for an answer. Even when it came to, you know, the simple matter of making a decision of how we were going to cover her burn wounds, she didn't listen to anything. She said, no, you're going to find a solution. You're going to look for it and you're going to make it work. And she did that, and she pushed us. She pushed us hard. There were fellow plastic surgeon colleagues of mine who have such admiration for her. They came to meet her. They came to meet this mom of this baby that wouldn't give up. And they still ask regularly about her. Wherever they can catch her, they look for her. And, you know, Annika, I have to say thank you to you for teaching me as much as you did. You know, those are lessons that I couldn't have learned if I did my medical school degree 10 times over. So, Sharon, I have to say to you, unfortunately, this was me chasing my goals. It was very selfish. If I was more selfless, I would have gone the morphine route. I would have gone and done another boob job. I would have fixed another nose and got my face in a nice magazine somewhere that said, he made that model's nose. So, that's a short-term gain. That what's in front of you is a long-term gain. So I have to say, unfortunately, we were very selfish. And we weren't as selfless as we purported to be, or the way we were made to be seen. We wanted the very best for Puppy, but we wanted the very best for ourselves. And I think in the end, that's what makes everything work. Because to come back to Eleanor Roosevelt, you have to be able to dream. You have to be able to believe in the beauty of those dreams, to own the future. So ladies and gentlemen, I hope I've given you something to think about, some motivation to look at this book with a different eye, maybe and not just see it as a story of a child who got burnt, who came through it. Because I think there's a real South African story, but a real human story there. Thank you very much.